3 weeks ago, this was a basketball story. Now it's a White House press briefing topic, a Supreme Court footnote, and apparently a fashion controversy, because saying biological sex is real is now the most dangerous sentence you can utter in professional sports. Forget the actual basketball. The real contact sport this summer is Sophie Cunningham versus a very large portion of sports media. Here's what actually happened. In a July 21 ESPN profile, reporter Hallie Grossman asked Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham about her views on transgender athletes. Cunningham didn't dodge. She said, "I think that I am here to extend love. But I also think with that love is truth, being honest. And I want to protect young girls in a locker room, or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men." That's it. That's the sentence that broke the internet. Not a slur. Not a threat. A basketball player saying she'd like girls' locker rooms to stay, remarkably, for girls. 2 days later, multiple outlets, Yahoo Sports and Outkick among them, caught up with her before the Fever's game against the Sun and gave her the chance every controversial athlete is supposed to take: the quiet retreat, the vague non-answer, the "I've learned and grown" statement written by a PR team. Cunningham said, and we quote, "I said what I said. I think it's kind of common sense." Somewhere, a media training consultant is weeping into a spreadsheet. Quick pause: if you're already picking a side, go ahead and hit like and subscribe now, because it gets better. Or worse, depending on your politics. On August 2nd, the Fever played the Minnesota Lynx, and according to People magazine's report, head coach Cheryl Reeve showed up wearing a t-shirt that said "Trans kids belong," visible, courtside, on a nationally televised broadcast, against the team employing the player she was subtweeting with cotton. Reeve and Cunningham reportedly had an animated conversation at midcourt beforehand. Afterward, Reeve said only that "both of us understand that we have platforms." Very diplomatic. Almost as diplomatic as wearing your rebuttal to work. Reeve also said publicly that there are no biological men in girls' locker rooms and pushed back on what she called the insinuation that transgender women are predators. 2 problems with that. First, Cunningham never called anyone a predator. She talked about privacy, not danger. Second, "there are no biological men in girls' locker rooms" is one of those sentences that ages about as well as milk in August, and you don't have to take our word for it. Just ask the multiple documented cases we've covered on this channel of exactly that happening at YMCAs and school facilities across the country. Outside the arena, Riley Gaines showed up with a sign. Not a bullhorn. Not a bonfire. A sign, 11 by 17 inches, that reads "Sophie, thank you, a girl mom." Arena staff told her to put it down because, in their own explanation, it had Cunningham's name on it. Somewhere in America, a t-shirt reading "Trans kids belong" got a primetime broadcast, and a thank you card got escorted out by security. If you're keeping score on whose speech is dangerous here, keep going, because it gets even better in Seattle. Reuters reported on July 30 that Seattle Storm minority co-owner Celeste Keaton confronted 2 teenage girls at a game for holding signs supporting Cunningham, allegedly cursing at them. The WNBA fined Keaton and suspended her for 5 home games. The Storm's majority owner, Ginny Gilder, issued a formal apology. Let's be clear about who we're talking about here: teenagers. At a basketball game. Holding a sign. And a team owner needed a 5-game timeout for how she handled that. If a WNBA team owner had done that to a group of trans rights supporters, this would have been a 5-alarm national story for a month. Instead, it's Chapter 4 of the Sophie Cunningham saga. This thing got big enough that on July 23, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about it directly and called the backlash against Cunningham astonishing, arguing most Americans already agree with her. And according to Gallup, not a conservative outlet, not a Cunningham fan club, just Gallup, she's right. Gallup's most recent Values and Beliefs survey found 69% of Americans believe transgender athletes should compete only on teams matching their birth sex. That number moved from 62% in 2021 up to 69% in 2023, and it's held steady at 69% since. Nearly 7 in 10 Americans. That's not a fringe opinion. That's most of the country agreeing with a WNBA reserve guard over several major newsrooms. And then the Supreme Court weighed in. On June 30, in the combined cases of Little versus Hecox and West Virginia versus B.P.J., the court ruled 6-3 that Title IX allows schools to maintain separate girls' and boys' teams based on biological sex, and that Idaho and West Virginia's laws didn't violate equal protection. Justice Brett Kavanaugh wrote the majority opinion. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing separately in concurrence, not in the majority opinion, "We're being precise here," put it in one sentence: "A man does not have a legal right to compete against women just because he believes that he is a woman." That's not a bumper sticker. That's now sitting in the United States, reports. Now, The Guardian's Howard Bryant took a different approach entirely. In an August 2 column headline, Sophie Cunningham isn't rejecting politics. She's cashing in on them. Bryant called her the right's anti-black, anti-transgender culture war ambassador. Notice what's missing from that sentence: any actual argument about biology, fairness, or locker rooms. Nothing about Title IX. Nothing about competitive advantage. Just an attack on her marketability, her race, and her fan base. When your rebuttal to boys shouldn't be in girls' locker rooms as well, she's popular with the wrong crowd, you've stopped debating and started deflecting. Quick second pause: if this is the kind of breakdown you actually want from a news channel instead of a press release with better lighting, share this with somebody who needs to see it, and make sure you're subscribed to What Say You News. To be fair, and we always try to be, the ACLU and the National Women's Law Center make a real argument here. Transgender kids already face high rates of bullying and isolation, and exclusion from teams matching their gender identity can make that worse. That's a legitimate human concern, and it deserves to be said out loud, not mocked. But it answers a different question than the one Cunningham asked. She's not asking whether trans kids deserve dignity. Of course they do. She's asking whether biological sex should determine who plays girls' sports and who's in girls' locker rooms. Those are two separate questions, and her critics keep answering the first one while pretending they've answered the second. Where What Say You News lands, Sophie Cunningham is right, and she's right without hedging. Gallup backs her. The Supreme Court backs her. And every single attempt to take her down, the shirt, the confiscated sign, the Guardian op-ed that somehow made this about her hairline, has landed as a swing and a miss. So here's our question for you. Was Cheryl Reeve's shirt a principled statement, or a coach using a national broadcast to lean on a player from another team? Is Sophie Cunningham just saying the common sense thing out loud, or has this gotten bigger than she ever wanted? What say you? Drop your verdict in the comments, and tell us why, not just which team you're on. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who'll disagree with you. See you in the next video. Thanks for listening and your support.